Queen Lyra sat upon her throne, the polished gold of her seat reflecting the lights of the Velcora-Prime Palace. Outside the tall crystal windows, the twin suns of Velcora cast long, burning beams over the city. Soldiers marched in the streets below, their armor shining like molten metal. Servants scurried about the marble halls, carrying trays of glowing fruit and cups filled with sweet liquid that shimmered under the light. Lyra was young for a queen, yet her gaze was sharp and commanding. Her people whispered that her laughter could silence a room faster than the sharpest sword. And yet today she laughed for an entirely different reason. A court scholar, thin and nervous, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, "our scouts report an unusual vessel approaching the outer rim gate. It is unlike anything in our records. Its design is archaic." Lyra tilted her head and let out a soft chuckle, brushing her long silver hair from her face. "Archaic, you say? Then it must be as harmless as the old tales of the human warriors." The scholar hesitated, swallowing. "The legends claim humans were fierce fighters, Your Majesty. They could defeat entire armies despite their small size and fragile bodies, but humans were extinct centuries ago. Or so we believed." Lyra's laughter grew louder, echoing through the great hall. "Fragile?" she said, rising to her full height. "Fragile? My soldiers could crush a human without even trying. We have no need for stories about tiny, soft creatures that vanished long ago. The humans are myths, scholar. Nothing more." Some members of the court nodded nervously. Others whispered behind their hands. None dared challenge the queen's voice, but curiosity shimmered in their eyes. Yet despite her laughter, a part of Lyra felt a flicker of unease. The scouts were not known for exaggeration, and if they reported a vessel in the outer rim, it was unlikely to be a coincidence. Still, she dismissed the thought with a wave of her hand. Myths cannot sail among the stars, she told herself. Myths cannot strike at Velcora-Prime. That evening, as the sun set and the city lights sparkled like stars caught in a crystal web, the strange vessel entered the atmosphere. It was small but durable, its hull covered in dents and scorch marks that spoke of long travel and harsh battles. It moved with silent precision, like a predator among the stars. Lyra watched from her balcony as the ship descended and hovered near the palace gates. Soldiers and engineers rushed to the landing area, scanning the vessel with energy sensors. But they found only one occupant. The human stepped out. He was small compared to the Dravani soldiers who surrounded him, not taller than a young Velcora apprentice, and yet he carried himself with an aura of quiet strength. His armor was old, dented, and scratched, bearing markings from a long-lost Earth language. The helmet under his arm revealed a face that was calm, serious, and unafraid. His eyes, deep and steady, seemed to look through the bustling palace guards directly to Lyra herself. "Bring him inside," Lyra commanded, her curiosity tinged with caution. Her advisors protested softly, but she ignored them. The queen was not one to let fear or caution dictate her decisions. When the human entered the great hall, the courtiers gasped. Some whispered that the creature could not be human. His posture was so firm, so confident that even the guards seemed uneasy. The human said nothing. He simply followed the palace escorts, his steps deliberate, controlled, unhurried. Lyra rose from her throne as he approached the center of the hall. "Tell me," she said, her voice calm yet commanding, "are you truly a human? My scholars have told me your kind vanished long ago. You are nothing but a story, a fairy tale." The human tilted his head slightly, his eyes steady. "I am human," he said in a low, firm voice, "and I am not here to tell stories." The court laughed nervously. Some of the younger nobles chuckled openly, but Lyra felt a ripple of unease. There was no fear in his voice, no hesitation, only certainty. "You carry no weapons, yet you come alone. Are you some fool who believes he can survive in our world unarmed?" she asked, raising a delicate hand to gesture at the human. He reached behind his back and slowly drew a sword. It was simple by Velcora standards, made of metal that shimmered faintly in the hall's light. There were no energy emitters, no glowing circuits. Yet the blade itself seemed alive, humming faintly with energy that was impossible to explain. The court gasped. Some drew back, whispering that it was impossible for a human to wield a weapon like that. The blade looked fragile, yet it radiated a quiet power. Lyra could not help but laugh again, though this time it was shorter, sharper. "A human draws a blade," she said. "And what can you do? My soldiers could cut you in half before you even raise it. The human's eyes never wavered. When words fail, he said, steel remembers. A murmur ran through the crowd. The words were strange, yet commanding. And though Lyra laughed at the statement, she felt a spark of unease. Very well, she said, stepping closer to the edge of the raised throne platform. Then show me. Show all of us what humans can do. Let my best warrior face you. We shall see if the stories are true. A tall Dravani warrior stepped forward. His armor gleamed, etched with energy channels that made it nearly indestructible. He carried a plasma blade that hissed and crackled with deadly energy. I will demonstrate, Your Majesty, he said, bowing once before raising his weapon. This human will see the might of Dravani steel. The human did not move. He simply held his sword, calm, steady, unshaken. Lyra watched closely. She could see the tension in the soldier's body, the way he expected to dominate a creature he assumed weak. But the human did not flinch. He did not hesitate. He simply waited. The soldier lunged. His plasma blade cut the air with a sharp hiss, leaving a faint trail of energy in its wake. The human sidestepped with a movement that was smooth and precise, almost like water flowing around a rock. The court gasped. Whispers spread like wildfire.
How did he? He moved faster than the eye can follow.
The human struck back. His sword, though old and simple, met the plasma blade with a sound that was almost musical. Sparks flew. Metal scraped against energy. And in that brief moment, the human's motion was so swift and exact, so controlled, that the Dravani soldier stumbled. His attack, meant to overwhelm, was blocked and countered before he could finish it. Lyra felt her breath catch. The stories of human warriors had been myths, legends meant to entertain children. Yet here in the marble hall of Velcora Prime, a human moved with skill and power that rivaled the finest warriors of her empire. The soldier swung again, more cautiously now, trying to anticipate the human's moves. But the human did not rely on brute strength. He flowed, adapted, and struck with precision. Each block, each step, each counterattack was measured. Finally, the human's sword pressed against the soldier's chest, just an inch from his neck. The soldier froze. Sweat ran down his face. For the first time, he felt fear, not for his life, but for the legend he had underestimated. Lyra leaned forward, gripping the arms of her throne. The laughter had gone from her face. Her heart pounded. The human warrior, mythical, extinct, fragile, was standing victorious. And he did not even appear to strain. The human slowly lowered his blade, keeping his eyes on Lyra. I fight only when I must, he said quietly. But when I fight to win. A silence followed. The court whispered. The guards stared. And Lyra realized that the tales were true. Humans had once walked the stars as warriors. And perhaps they still could. For the first time, the queen who had mocked the stories felt a flicker of respect. And fear. A human had arrived in Velcora Prime, not as a myth, not as a story, but as a living legend. The halls of the Velcora Prime Palace still buzzed from the display of the human's skill. Courtiers whispered endlessly, some in awe, some in disbelief. For Queen Lyra Ven, the experience had left a lingering unease. A human, small, fragile by her standards, had bested one of her finest warriors. Not with brute strength, not with technology, but with skill, patience, and precision. The next morning, Lyra summoned the human to the royal chambers. The room was vast, with walls of polished crystal reflecting the rising suns. At the center of the chamber, a large table was strewn with star charts, battle plans, and ancient scrolls. Lyra's advisors had been instructed to observe silently, their eyes wide with curiosity and caution. The human entered with the same calm confidence he had shown the day before. He did not bow, did not lower his gaze. He simply stood at attention, his sword sheathed but visible at his side. Lyra regarded him carefully. Tell me, she began, her tone measured. How did your kind survive against enemies larger and stronger than you? How did you win battles that should have been impossible? The human's eyes scanned the maps on the table. His voice was calm and firm when he answered. We survived because we learned to see every detail, to understand the battlefield, and to trust in ourselves. Strength alone is not enough. Skill, strategy, and courage can overcome the strongest opponent. Lyra raised an eyebrow. Strategy and courage? Those are words. Weapons are what win wars, not words. The human smiled faintly, though it was not a mocking smile. Words can warn, inspire, and guide. But when the fighting begins, steel remembers. Every strike, every parry, every movement must have purpose. You will see. Lyra studied him closely. Something about the way he spoke, the way he moved, suggested that he truly believed in what he said. Unlike many who claimed legendary skill, he carried no arrogance. He did not boast. Yet he had proven himself already. Very well, she said. If your words hold truth, then you will help train my soldiers. If you can teach them even a fraction of what you know, perhaps we can defend Velcora Prime against our enemies. The human inclined his head. I will do what I can. The first day of training began at dawn in the palace courtyard. The courtyard was vast, lined with towering crystal spires and illuminated by the suns. Lyra had gathered her best soldiers, warriors of every rank and every specialty. They were armed with plasma blades, energy shields, and the most advanced weapons Velcora had to offer. The human stood before them, his simple metal sword in hand. Many of the soldiers laughed quietly among themselves. How can a small human teach us? One whispered. We are the strongest fighters in the Empire. The human's voice cut through the murmurs. Listen carefully. Strength is not the same as skill. The sharpest blade in the world is useless if it cannot be controlled. The soldiers scoffed, but Lyra remained silent. She wanted to see how this human, this relic from a forgotten age, could teach her elite warriors. The human began with simple exercises. He showed them how to hold a sword so that it could move fluidly, how to position their feet for balance, and how to read an opponent's movements before they acted. At first, the soldiers found his techniques strange. They were used to power and force, not subtlety and precision. One by one, the soldiers tried to follow his movements. Some stumbled. Some became frustrated. Others laughed, thinking the exercises were too simple to matter. The human walked among them, correcting stances, adjusting grips, and demonstrating techniques with effortless grace. When he swung his sword, the motion was smooth and fast, yet perfectly controlled. A soldier who had mocked him found himself on the ground after a single well-placed maneuver. Word of the human's skill spread quickly. Soldiers who had been skeptical began to pay attention. Even the most arrogant warriors could not ignore his ability. By the third day, the courtyard had transformed into a place of disciplined training. Soldiers who had once mocked the human moved in coordinated patterns, their swords flowing like water under his guidance. Every movement was deliberate. Every strike had a purpose. Lyra watched from a balcony, her interest piqued. She had expected a human to fail, to be outmatched and humiliated. Instead, she saw her soldiers improving faster than she had thought possible. The human was not just a fighter. He was a teacher, a strategist, and a leader. Then came the real test. News arrived that the Keth Dominion, a hostile alien faction that had long threatened the edges of Velcora space, had launched a raid on a nearby colony. Their forces were overwhelming, and the local defenders were struggling to hold them back. Lyra called for a council meeting. Her advisors urged caution. Send the fleet, they said. Use the plasma cannons. Let our soldiers fight from a distance. We cannot risk our elite forces against such numbers. Lyra shook her head. No, she said. We cannot afford half measures. If this human can teach our soldiers what he claims, then we will test it. I want my battalion ready to face the Dominion with him at their side. The human, Captain Reese Hale, accepted the task without hesitation. We fight not to show strength, but to survive and protect those who cannot defend themselves. They will learn, and we will win, or die trying. The soldiers prepared for deployment under Reese's command. Unlike before, they were no longer laughing or mocking. They had begun to understand that the human's experience was different, forged in the fires of war and survival, not privilege or empire. As the battalion boarded the transport ships, Reese walked among them, inspecting their equipment and adjusting their stances. His movements were precise, his instructions clear. Watch your partner. Anticipate the enemy. Every step, every strike matters. Hesitation is death. The journey to the colony was tense. Many soldiers had never faced an enemy like the Dominion. They had relied on superior weapons and technology, not skill and strategy. Now, under Reese's guidance, they were learning a new way of fighting, one that demanded focus, patience, and courage. When they arrived, the battlefield was chaotic. Dominion drones swarmed the colony, cutting through walls and defenses with ease. Civilians ran in panic, and the local defenders were on the verge of collapse. Reese assessed the situation calmly. "Positions," he ordered. "Move as I show you. Cover each other. Remember your training." The soldiers followed his lead. At first their movements were hesitant, but under Reese's watchful eyes they began to coordinate. They formed small squads, striking with precision, defending each other and countering the Dominion's attacks. Reese fought at the front, his blade moving faster than the eye could follow. Drones that had seemed unstoppable were dismantled one by one. His presence inspired the soldiers. They fought harder, moved smarter, and began to turn the tide of battle. Even Lyra, observing through a secure communication channel, felt her heart quicken. The humans' techniques were unfamiliar but effective. Soldiers who had once relied on brute force were now using skill, strategy, and coordination to overcome a seemingly superior enemy. Hours passed, and the battlefield shifted. Dominion forces, confident in their strength, began to falter. They had not anticipated soldiers who could anticipate, adapt, and fight as one. And at the center of it all, Reese Hale moved like a force of nature, small, unassuming, yet unstoppable. By nightfall, the Dominion retreated. Their fleet withdrew, leaving the colony battered but intact. The defenders had survived, and many of the soldiers owed their lives to the human captain. Back at the palace, Lyra awaited their return. When the battalion entered the gates, she could see the exhaustion on their faces, but also a new respect. They had faced overwhelming odds and survived. They had learned something that no technology or weapon could teach: discipline, courage, and the power of human skill. Reese stood at attention before Lyra. "The battle is won," he said simply. "But the war is far from over. You must be ready, Your Majesty. Others will come." Lyra studied him closely. For the first time, she felt something she had never felt before: a mixture of admiration, respect, and a growing understanding of what humans had once been. Her laughter at their legends was gone. "You have proven yourself," she said quietly, "not just as a fighter but as a teacher and a leader. Tell me, Captain, how did your people survive when so many fell?" Reese's eyes were steady. "We survived because we refused to give up. Because we learned, adapted, and fought for those who could not fight for themselves. Strength is important, but courage and skill define a true warrior." Lyra nodded slowly. She had mocked the stories, dismissed the legends. And yet here was proof, living proof, that humans had once walked among the stars as warriors beyond measure. And now, for the first time in centuries, the galaxy would see what a human could truly do. The victory against the Dominion was celebrated throughout Velcora Prime, but Queen Lyra Ven knew that it was only the beginning. From her palace balcony, she watched the bustling city below. The soldiers who had survived the battle walked with newfound pride, their movements more confident, their eyes brighter. The tales of a human warrior had spread quickly. People whispered about Captain Reese Hale, the human who had turned the tide of battle with nothing but his skill and a simple sword. But Lyra's mind was focused elsewhere. Reports from the scouts indicated that the Dominion was regrouping. Their next attack would be larger, more coordinated, and far more dangerous. The victory at the colony had been hard won, but it had only revealed the true threat looming beyond Velcora's borders. Reese walked into the council chamber, his sword slung at his side. He carried himself with the same calm confidence as before, yet there was a seriousness in his eyes. He had seen war before, real war, not the ceremonial displays that Velcora soldiers were used to, and he knew that preparation was the key to survival. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing slightly, "the Dominion will return. They have learned from their defeat, and they will strike harder. If we do not prepare, we will not survive the next attack." Lyra nodded. "I understand. That is why I have placed you in command of a battalion. You will train my soldiers, organize them, and prepare them for the next battle. I trust your judgment, Captain." Reese's eyes scanned the room. "We will need more than courage. We will need discipline, coordination, and strategy. And we will need every soldier to understand that their strength lies not in weapons alone, but in their mind, their skill, and their will to fight." The training that followed was unlike anything the Dravani soldiers had experienced before. Reese focused not only on combat techniques but also on teamwork, observation, and anticipation. In the training yard, he arranged the soldiers in squads. Each squad had a mission, one to defend, one to attack, and one to observe. He gave them no shields or advanced weapons at first, only simple swords and their own instincts. Many of the soldiers grumbled. They had fought with energy weapons for years and believed they were invincible. Weapons do not make a warrior, Rhys said quietly but firmly. A weapon is only as strong as the person who wields it. Learn to fight with your mind, your body, and your courage. Only then will you survive. The soldiers began cautiously. At first, their movements were clumsy. They stumbled over each other, misjudged attacks, and grew frustrated. Rhys moved among them, correcting their stances, demonstrating strikes and showing them how to anticipate their opponent's actions. Don't swing blindly, he instructed one soldier. See the attack before it comes. Move with it, not against it. Another soldier lunged too quickly and fell. Rhys helped him up. Patience, he said. Patience wins battles, not speed alone. By the third day, the soldiers were beginning to understand. Their movements became smoother, more coordinated. They learned to protect each other, to trust their teammates, and to adapt to changing situations. The courtyard echoed with the sound of metal clashing against metal, a symphony of skill rather than brute force. Even Lyra, who had watched from above, could not hide her fascination. She had expected to see a human fail, to be outmatched and humiliated. Instead, she saw a captain who transformed her soldiers into a disciplined, capable fighting force. One morning, Rhys called the soldiers together. Today, he said, we will test what you have learned. We will simulate a Dominion attack. Move as if the enemy is real. Treat every strike as life or death. The soldiers prepared, their eyes focused, their grips tight on their swords. Rhys moved to the center of the yard and drew his blade. The sun glinted off the metal, creating a faint shimmer that made the simple sword seem almost magical. He advanced slowly, deliberately, letting the soldiers approach. Then with a swift motion he struck. The soldiers were ready. They moved as one, blocking, parrying, and countering. Every step, every motion, every strike was calculated. They were no longer individual warriors, but a single, unified force. The drill continued for hours. Rhys pushed them to their limits, testing their endurance, coordination, and adaptability. The soldiers who had once mocked him began to understand. The humans' techniques were not simple tricks. They were lessons in survival, skill, and the art of war. At the end of the day, the soldiers stood exhausted but triumphant. They had faced their captain's sword, endured his training, and emerged stronger. Rhys sheathed his blade and looked at them. You have done well, he said. But remember, this is only the beginning. The Dominion will not wait. We must be ready, always. Days later, the scouts reported another Dominion fleet approaching, larger than the last. Lyra gathered her advisors and the human captain in the war room. Star maps glowed on the tables showing the fleet's position and trajectory. The Dominion intends to strike at the heart of Velcora Prime, Rhys said, tracing a path across the map. If we do not act quickly, the city will fall. Lyra frowned. Then we strike first? Rhys shook his head. No, we do not have enough ships to engage in open battle. We will use strategy. We will defend where we must and strike where the enemy is weakest. And my soldiers, your soldiers, will be ready for anything. The council nodded, some with doubt, some with hope. The Queen looked at Rhys. You will lead the battalion? Yes, he replied. We will hold the lines, protect the civilians, and ensure that Velcora Prime survives. When the Dominion fleet arrived, the battle began at dawn. The sky was filled with warships and the air hummed with energy as weapons fired across space. Dominion forces attempted to land troops on the outskirts of the city, expecting an easy victory. But Rhys and his battalion were ready. Using the tactics he had taught, the soldiers moved swiftly, anticipating every attack. They used the terrain to their advantage, setting traps and ambushes. Every movement was precise, every strike calculated. The Dominion troops, expecting easy prey, were met with a force they could not anticipate. Soldiers who had once relied on technology and strength now fought with skill and strategy. They adapted, coordinated, and struck with efficiency that shocked the enemy. Rhys was at the front, his sword moving with unmatched precision. He deflected attacks, protected his soldiers, and inspired courage. Every motion was deliberate, every strike purposeful. The Dominion troops fell back, confused and frustrated by the unexpected resistance. Hours passed and the battlefield shifted. The Dominion, confident in their strength, had not anticipated soldiers who could anticipate, adapt, and fight as one. By midday, the enemy began to retreat, their formations broken and morale shaken. After the battle, Lyra walked among the returning soldiers. Many bore wounds, but their eyes shone with pride. They had faced an overwhelming enemy and survived, not because of their weapons, but because of the training they had received from the human captain. Rhys stood at attention, surveying the battlefield. "This is the way of war," he said quietly. "Strength alone will not protect you. Skill, courage, and teamwork will." Lyra nodded, feeling a deep respect for the human who had taught her soldiers to fight in a way she had never imagined. She had laughed at the legends of humans, dismissed them as myths, and yet here was proof. A human had come not as a story, but as a living example of what courage, skill, and determination could achieve. That night, as the sun set and the city lights glimmered like stars, Lyra stood on her balcony watching the soldiers below. They had survived their first major battle under Rhys's guidance. They had learned a new way of fighting, and the human captain had proven that even the smallest, seemingly fragile warriors could change the course of a war. And somewhere, beyond the stars, the Dominion fleet regrouped, unaware that a new force had risen to challenge them. A force led by a human warrior who had drawn his blade and reminded the galaxy that skill, courage, and determination could overcome even the greatest odds. The city of Velcora Prime was quiet, but the calm was deceptive. In the palace, Queen Lyra Ven stared at the star maps glowing on the table before her. Reports from the scouts confirmed her fears. The Keth Dominion had assembled a massive fleet, far larger and more coordinated than before. Their attack would not be a simple raid. It would be a full-scale invasion. Lyra turned to Captain Rhys Hale, standing at attention beside her. His sword hung at his side, still bearing the faint scars from the previous battle. "Your Majesty," he said, "the Dominion intends to strike the city directly. If we do not prepare, Velcora Prime will fall." Lyra nodded, her mind racing. "We will not allow that. But our soldiers, do you think they are ready?" Rhys's eyes were calm but serious. "They are stronger than before, but strength alone will not save them. We must train them to fight together, to anticipate, to adapt, and we must ensure every soldier knows why they fight. A soldier who fights for nothing is a soldier who falls first." Lyra studied him carefully. She had once laughed at the legends of humans, mocking their supposed skill and bravery. But now she knew the truth. Humans had survived, endured, and thrived because of their courage and determination. And in Rhys Hale she saw that same spirit alive once more. The next morning, Rhys gathered the soldiers in the palace courtyard. This time the training was more intense. The soldiers had already learned the basics of human combat techniques, but now Rhys introduced advanced strategies and battlefield simulations. He arranged them in squads, each tasked with specific objectives. One squad defended the perimeter, another moved in coordinated attacks, and another served as a reserve force ready to respond wherever needed. "Remember," Rhys said, his voice steady and commanding, "the enemy is not just strong, they are relentless. We must be smarter, faster, and more disciplined. Every movement matters. Every decision matters. Hesitation will cost lives." The soldiers trained tirelessly. Rhys pushed them harder than ever, but always with guidance and encouragement. When a soldier faltered, he corrected their stance or technique. When a squad failed a maneuver, he broke it down step by step until they mastered it. At first, some soldiers grumbled, frustrated by the intensity. But slowly they began to see the results. Their movements became smoother, more precise. They began to trust one another, to anticipate each other's actions, to fight as a unit rather than individuals. By the end of the week, the soldiers were no longer simply strong. They were efficient, disciplined, and coordinated. They had learned not just to fight, but to survive, adapt, and overcome. Then came the test of fire. Scouts reported that a Dominion advance team had appeared at the outskirts of Velcora Prime, attempting to probe the city's defenses. It was a small force, but enough to test the soldiers' readiness. Lyra and Rhys watched from the palace observation deck as the battalion moved to intercept. The human captain led from the front, his sword flashing in the light as he demonstrated techniques and strategies in real time. The soldiers engaged the Dominion forces. At first, the attackers believed they could overwhelm them with sheer numbers. But the soldiers, trained by Rhys, moved with precision and coordination. They set traps, used the terrain to their advantage, and struck in patterns that the Dominion could not anticipate. Rhys himself fought at the center, his sword cutting through the enemy with speed and accuracy. Each movement was deliberate, each strike purposeful. The Dominion soldiers, confident in their technology and numbers, found themselves outmatched by skill and strategy. Within hours, the advance team was defeated. Dominion forces retreated, leaving the city unharmed. But Rhys knew this was only the beginning. The main invasion force was still out there, and it would be far larger and more dangerous. Over the next few days, Rhys continued to prepare the soldiers. He introduced complex battle drills combining defense, attack, and tactical retreats. The soldiers learned to adapt to changing circumstances, to anticipate the enemy's moves, and to cover each other's weaknesses. He also emphasized the importance of morale. A soldier who fights for hope fights stronger than one who fights for fear, he told them. You are not just fighting for yourselves or even for your queen. You are fighting for your families, your friends, and your city. That purpose will give you strength beyond measure. Lyra watched the training with increasing admiration. She had once believed humans were small, weak creatures, incapable of surviving in a galaxy filled with powerful civilizations. Now she saw the truth. Humans had endured not because they were the strongest, but because they were resilient, disciplined, and courageous, and under Rhys's guidance, Velcora Prime soldiers were beginning to embody those same qualities. The invasion finally came at dusk. The sky was darkened by Dominion warships, their engines glowing ominously. The city's defenses activated, energy shields flaring to life. Citizens hurried to shelters while soldiers took their positions, swords and plasma weapons ready. Rhys led the battalion to the front lines. His presence inspired the soldiers. They moved with confidence, anticipating attacks, coordinating strikes, and defending one another. The Dominion forces landed, expecting an easy conquest. But they found themselves met by a force that was organized, disciplined, and relentless. Every squad moved as one, every strike precise, every maneuver calculated. Rhys fought at the center, his sword a blur. He deflected attacks, guided soldiers, and led counterstrikes. The Dominion soldiers, confident in their technology and numbers, could not match the skill and coordination they faced. Hours passed, and the battle raged. The Dominion pressed hard, but Rhys's tactics held. Soldiers who had once relied solely on brute strength now fought with strategy, skill, and purpose. And in the center of it all, the human captain moved with unmatched precision, turning the tide of battle again and again. By midnight, the Dominion forces began to retreat. Their ships withdrew, leaving the city battered but intact. Velcora Prime had survived not through sheer power, but through the courage, skill, and determination of its soldiers. After the battle, Lyra walked among the returning soldiers. Many were tired, some wounded, but their eyes shone with pride. They had faced overwhelming odds and survived. They had learned that strength alone was not enough, that skill, discipline, and courage could overcome even the greatest challenges. Rhys stood nearby, surveying the battlefield. This victory is ours, he said quietly. But the war is far from over. The Dominion will regroup. We must be ready for whatever comes next. Lyra nodded, her respect for the human captain growing with every passing day. She had mocked the stories of humans, dismissed them as myths, and yet here was proof. A human had come and changed the course of a war. That night, as the city settled and the suns rose again, Lyra stood on her balcony watching the soldiers below. They had been transformed, not just into fighters, but into warriors of skill, courage, and purpose. And at the center of it all was Rhys Hale, a human who had drawn his blade and reminded the galaxy what it truly meant to fight. Somewhere among the stars, the Dominion fleet regrouped, unaware that they had already lost the war of hearts and minds. The human spirit, embodied in one warrior, had sparked a change that would be remembered for generations, and Queen Lyra, who had once laughed at the tales of human fighters, now understood the truth. Courage, skill, and determination could come from the smallest and most unexpected places, and sometimes that was enough to change the course of history. The calm before the storm was almost unbearable. Velcora Prime had survived the initial Dominion attacks, but reports indicated that the main fleet was approaching. Unlike the previous raids, this force was enormous. Thousands of warships, bristling with energy weapons, and fully armed troops ready to conquer the city. Queen Lyra Ven stood on her balcony gazing at the stars. The suns had set, and the first lights of Velcora Prime twinkled below like fireflies. Beside her, Captain Rhys Hale surveyed the city through a set of enhanced optics. His sword rested at his side, a simple yet commanding presence. Your Majesty, Rhys said, his voice calm but resolute. This will be our greatest challenge. The Dominion intends to crush us, to make an example of Velcora Prime. But we will stand not because of numbers, not because of weapons, but because of our courage, our skill, and our determination. Lyra studied him closely. She had once mocked the stories of humans, laughed at the idea of their strength. But now she knew the truth. Humans had endured when stronger enemies had fallen, and Rhys Hale, this single human, had brought that spirit back to life. You will lead the battalion? She asked. Yes, Rhys replied. We will hold the line, protect the city, and inspire the people. Every soldier will fight as one, and every citizen will know hope is stronger than fear. At dawn, the Dominion fleet arrived. The sky was dark with warships, their engines glowing ominously. The city's defenses activated, energy shields flaring to life, and sirens echoed across Velcora Prime. Civilians rushed to safety, guided by trained volunteers and soldiers alike. Rhys's battalion took positions at the city's front lines. The soldiers moved with precision and discipline, their swords gleaming, their shields charged, their eyes focused. Every maneuver was calculated, every action part of a larger strategy. The Dominion troops landed, confident in their overwhelming numbers. But they had not anticipated a force that had been trained to anticipate, adapt, and fight as one. Rhys advanced with his soldiers, his sword cutting through the chaos with unmatched skill. Every strike was deliberate, every parry precise. The Dominion forces pressed hard, but the soldiers of Velcora Prime, guided by the human captain, responded with coordination and courage that seemed almost superhuman. The battle raged through the morning. The Dominion's technology was powerful, but it could not replace strategy. Soldiers who had once relied solely on energy weapons now used their training, moving fluidly across the battlefield, defending one another, and striking with precision. Rhys was everywhere at once, guiding, striking, and inspiring. His sword moved faster than the eye could follow, a blur of steel that seemed to speak to the soldiers. Courage, skill, and unity. By midday, the tide began to turn. Dominion troops, confident in their superiority, started to falter. They were not accustomed to facing opponents who could anticipate their every move, who fought not with brute force but with discipline and intelligence. Lyra watched from the palace tower, her heart racing. She had once dismissed the stories of humans as myths, yet here was living proof of their power. Rhys Hale had taught her soldiers what courage and skill could accomplish, and now they were showing it in full force. As the battle continued, Rhys identified a weakness in the Dominion formation. A cluster of ships had broken off from the main fleet, vulnerable to a coordinated strike. He signaled his soldiers and led a small elite unit to exploit the opening. The attack was swift and precise. Soldiers moved like shadows, striking from unexpected angles, disabling the enemy ships and forcing the Dominion troops into retreat. Rhys fought at the front, his sword cutting a path through the opposition. Each motion calculated, each strike decisive. The Dominion commander realized too late that the human strategy and skill had outmatched their numbers. Panic spread through the enemy ranks and the retreat became chaotic. Velcora Prime's forces pressed their advantage, pushing the Dominion back and reclaiming lost ground. By evening, the battle was over. The Dominion fleet had been driven away, its troops scattered and demoralized. Velcora Prime stood battered but unbroken. The city's citizens emerged from their shelters, cheering for the soldiers who had protected them. Rhys sheathed his sword and surveyed the battlefield. Exhausted soldiers leaned on their weapons, but their eyes shone with pride. They had faced impossible odds and survived not through raw strength, but through skill, courage, and determination. Queen Lyra approached him, her face a mixture of relief and admiration. "You have done what I thought impossible," she said. "You have shown us the true meaning of courage and skill. My people owe you their lives." Rhys looked at her calmly. "It is not me alone. Every soldier, every citizen who fought, gave their strength to this victory. Humans survive not by being the strongest alone, but by standing together, by fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves." Lyra nodded, understanding finally dawning. The stories of humans had not been exaggerated. They had survived because they refused to give up, because they adapted, and because they fought with courage and intelligence. In the days that followed, Velcora Prime rebuilt and recovered. Soldiers continued to train under Reese's guidance, improving every day. Citizens worked together to repair damage, distribute resources, and ensure the city remained strong. Reese remained at the center, leading exercises, mentoring soldiers, and inspiring hope. He had proven that even one human, armed with courage, skill, and determination, could change the course of history. Stories of the battle spread across the galaxy. Other civilizations heard of the human captain who had led Velcora Prime to victory against overwhelming odds. Legends once thought lost were reborn. Children learned of Reese Hale, not just as a fighter but as a teacher, a leader, and a symbol of courage. Lyra often stood on her balcony, watching the city thrive. She remembered the day she had laughed at the stories of humans, mocking their strength and bravery. Now she understood the truth. Humans were not just survivors. They were warriors, teachers, and legends. One evening she found Reese standing alone in the palace courtyard, gazing at the stars. His sword rested beside him, simple and unassuming, yet a symbol of his skill and courage. "You have done more than I could have imagined," she said softly. "You have shown us what it means to fight, to survive, and to inspire." Reese looked at her, his expression calm but firm. "We are all capable of more than we believe. Courage, skill, and determination are not measured by size or strength, but by the will to endure and protect. That is what humans have always known, and that is what we have brought back to the galaxy." Lyra nodded, feeling a deep respect for the human who had transformed her soldiers, saved her city, and reminded the galaxy of the power of courage. Years later, Reese Hale's name was still remembered. Schools taught of his battles, soldiers trained with his techniques, and citizens spoke of the human who had changed Velcora Prime forever. The tales of human fighters, once considered myths, were now legends renewed. And somewhere among the stars, Reese looked toward a distant world called Terra, the home of the humans whose spirit he carried. A small smile crossed his face. Humans had endured, and their lessons, courage, and determination lived on, not just in stories, but in the hearts of all who believed in hope, skill, and bravery. Queen Lyra, once a skeptic, now spoke of him with reverence. "A human drew his blade," she said to her council, "and reminded us what it truly means to fight. Not for glory, not for conquest, but for hope." The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humans, small and fragile though they might appear, could face any challenge and emerge victorious. And one human, Captain Reese Hale, had proven it beyond doubt. In the end, the legends had been true all along, and now they lived again,